أهلا بيكم في دروس الأحياء للصف الثالث ثانوي. Today we're going to continue our talk about muscle contraction, part of movement in man. So let's begin. Okay, now last time we talked about the structure of the muscle, the skeletal muscle, the muscle fiber, and how the muscle responds by contracting to the nerve impulse. How does it respond to the nerve impulse? We talked about this, and we talked about the motor endoplate and the synaptic lift. Now, in this lecture, we're going to talk about what happens in the muscle itself. This is the mechanism of muscle contraction. Okay? ففرقوا mechanism of muscle contraction. Okay, last time we studied stimulation, muscle stimulation. Today we're going to study the muscle contraction. This is explained by a scientist called Huxley. He delivered to us the theory of sliding filaments. The filaments بتتزحلق على بعض. بتتداخل في بعض الfilaments. That's why the muscle gets shortened and it contracts. Okay? And this depends on the microscopic structure of the muscle fiber, which consists of myofibers. And we studied before that the myofibrils has actin and myosin. And the actin is a thin filament, while the myosin is thick filament. Remember our talk about the light band and the dark bands. Okay? All this were studied under the electron microscopy by comparing a muscle in a contraction state to a muscle in relaxation state. Okay? So remember the name Huxley and the sliding filaments theory. Sliding filaments theory. Okay? So what happens? Huxley concluded that protein filaments slide over each other. بيتداخلوا في بعض. بيتزحلقوا على بعض. Slide over each other due to the presence of transverse links. You see these links? عاملة كده أقول لكم إزاي؟ زي مقاديف القارب كده. ان اللينكس دي بتوصل بين المايوسين والاكتين، ولما تبقى المسل ستيميوليتد اللينكس دي بتتحرك، بتشد الاكتين ناحيتها فيتداخل مع بعض. اوكي؟ بتشد الاكتين or pulls the actin towards in opposite directions. That's why the muscle contracts. The transverse links act as hooks that pull the actin filaments from both sides towards each other. Towards each other معناها ان الزي لاينز هتقرب من بعض. فهمتوا قصدي؟ الزي لاينز هتقرب من بعض، اللي هي الزي لاينز دي اللي ماسكه الاكتين هتقرب من بعض. طيب طالما في حركه حصلت او في اكشن حصلت يبقى محتاجين طاقه. الطاقه دي بتتجاب منين؟ The energy comes from the stored ATP. فافتكروا هنا for the muscle to contract it needs ATP. هندرس كمان شوية ان for the muscle to relax also needs ATP. ففهمتوا في الحالتين بتحتاج ATP. اوكي؟ والATP ده بيجي من حاجتين، يا اما ايروبيك ميتابوليزم، يعني لو في اكسجين جاي من الهواء وفي تنفس عادي وده بيكفي للمسل كونتراكشن، يا اما انيروبيك ريسبيريشن لما يبقى الاكسجين مش كافي انه يخلي المسل كونتراكت، فالاي تي بي بيبقى produced by what's so called the anaerobic respiration. anaerobic يعني اللا هوائي، التنفس اللاهوائي، وده هنتكلم عنه كمان شويه صغيرين. Okay, so the transverse links act as hooks that pull the actin filaments from both sides using the stored ATP. Okay, so remember the transverse links connecting myosin to actin. Okay, see, this is muscle in the relaxed state. This muscle in the contraction state. You will be asked about this. This is in the relaxed state. This is in contracted state. You see the Z lines become closer to each other, and the semi-light zone in the middle almost disappears. Almost disappears. Okay? Because the alternation of actin and myosin in this area. So the Z lines become closer to each other, and when the stimulus disappears, the transverse links move away from the actin filaments. خلاص شدة الأكتين لما محتاجين relaxation تنفصل عن الأكتين اللي هي transverse links. Okay? When the muscle relaxes, the Z lines move away from each other. Okay? So in contraction, the sarcomere becomes shorter than in relaxation. The sarcomere is longer than the contracted sarcomere. Okay, now for this to happen, for the relaxation to happen, to separate the transverse links coming from the myosin to the actin, we need also ATP. So remember, in contraction we need ATP, and in relaxation we need ATP. طب افرض ان ال ATP ده مش موجود، المسل مش هيحصل لها relaxation. Therefore the muscle is still in a contraction state and cannot relax. Okay? Please pay attention to these points. احنا قلنا في relaxation محتاجين ATP كمان. طب افرض ما فيش ATP، يبقى مش هيحصل relaxation. معناها ان المصل هتفضل في contraction state. Okay? This theory applies, yes, okay, to the striated muscles, but it does not apply to the unstriated muscles, which means the smooth muscles. Although the smooth muscles also contain the protein filaments actin and myosin، لكن زي ما قلت لكم في المحاضرة اللي فاتت انه ما بيبقوش مترتبين على هيئة شرايط مضيئة وشرايط دارك مظلمة. فهمتوا قصدي ازاي؟ ما بيبقوش واخدين عاملين الستريشنز اللي موجودة characteristic of skeletal muscle. Okay, the motor unit. Now the structural unit of the muscle is the muscle fiber and the sarcomere, but the functional unit of the muscular system is the motor unit. The motor unit معناها nerve والmuscle fibers اللي supplied by this nerve. So the functional unit of the muscle is called the motor unit. ومحصلة summation of all these motor units produce the muscle contraction. Each motor unit consists of a group of muscle fibers and the nerve fibers supplying them. Please do not forget this. Group of muscle fibers and the nerve fibers supplying them. يبقى الفانكشنال unit مش بس muscle، لا دي muscle و nerve. Okay? As the motor nerve fiber enters the muscle, divides into a large number of branches, usually from 5 to 100. واحفظ الرقم ده. 5 to 100. يعني كل nerve fiber supplies 5 to 100 muscle fibers. Okay? And each terminal branch of the nerve has one muscle fiber attached to it by means of the motor endoplate, and we studied the motor endoplate in the last lecture اللي هي المكان اللي فيه synaptic cleft. Okay? This is called the neuromuscular junction, and as you can see here, this is the nerve. These are the nerve fibers, synapsing on the muscle fibers of the muscle. Okay? So the motor unit is the functional unit of the skeletal muscle. Okay, muscle fatigue، الارهاق العضلي يعني. المصل امتى تبقى تعبانه؟ ما بتعملش contraction كافي. Repeated and rapid contraction of muscles leads to fatigue. Why? Because the blood is unable anymore to supply the muscle rapidly. البلد مش قادر يواكب سرعة انقباضات المصل، فمش قادر to supply oxygen كفاية علشان المصل to contract. Okay? Accordingly, the muscle converts glycogen. Now, ايه ال storage form of ATP in the muscle؟ ايه المادة اللي لو فككتها كده موجودة جوه المصل هتديك ATP؟ هي الجلايكوجين. جلايكوجين الانيمال ستارش او النشا الحيواني. الجلايكوجين turns to glucose and oxidized anaerobically without oxygen is present. So what happens? This leads to the accumulation of an end product called the lactic acid. Lactic acid. And lactic acid, when accumulates in the muscle, this causes muscle fatigue. And ممكن كمان muscle cramps. Okay? So, glycogen is the ATP storage form in the muscle. It breaks into glucose anaerobically, becomes oxidized, and one of the end products of this transformation is or this reaction, I mean, is the accumulation of lactic acid. See, this is a normal muscle contraction. This is muscle fatigue. Now, what's the difference between this and this? See here, this is normal contraction, this is normal contraction. This is another contraction, but subsided, becomes relaxed again. But here the muscle contraction did not subside. Continuous muscle contraction. This is the cramp. هو ده الشد العضلي. Okay? Why does it happen? Because the shortage of ATP in the muscle leads to prevention of the separation of the transverse links between the actin and myosin. So the muscle still in case of contraction and cannot relax. I told you before, contraction needs ATP and relaxation needs ATP. Okay? Now at rest in the relaxed state, the muscle is supplied by enough amount of oxygen, and this leads to the aerobic cellular respiration. aerobic هنا مش anaerobic. aerobic الهوائي يعني الاكسجين موجود بوفرة، يبقى ما فيش اي مشاكل and this produces a large amount of ATP, causing of the separation of the transverse links between the myosin and actin, and this leads to relaxation وتهيئة المصل انها تستقبل نبضة عصبية تانية عشان يحصل لها contraction. Okay, so please pay attention to these points. Muscle fatigue, what is the cause of muscle fatigue, and why there are some times that the muscle cannot relax. خدوا بالكم من دي، كله بسبب accumulation of lactic acid with shortage of ATP. Now, excessive muscle spasm may lead to tear in the muscle causing bleeding. السبازم ده لو كان جامد قوي ممكن يقطع المصل. اوكي، يمزع المصل. ده مهم جدا. Also the muscle spasm may be caused due to troubles of the concerning the nerve impulses. زي حالات الصرع كده، بتصدر كميات هائلة من النيرف impulses رايحة للمسلز، فالمسلز تتشنج، تفضل contracting على طول. فهمتوا قصدي ازاي؟ زي نوبة الصرع، زي اللي بيحصل في نوبة المصل. This resulted from the arrival of incorrect nerve impulses، يعني nerve impulses مش صحيحة from the brain to the muscles during its normal performance. Okay, I hope you got the maximum benefit from this lecture, and thank you very much for watching.